I cannot believe I found another game in this franchise that I absolutely despised. It's crazy because I imagined after Secret of Mana, I would probably never find a game like it on its level until we got to the remake. But here we are. I found something that not only do I absolutely despise, I think I hate it more than Secret of Mana. Dawn of Mana, I'm actually impressed you actually did that. You have dethroned Secret as my least favorite game in the series so far. And okay. So I've always heard that this was the worst game in the series. The horror stories around it are very fascinating. But hearing about it and actually experiencing it for yourself are like two vastly different things. I genuinely can't believe how unfun of an experience this game was. And I genuinely don't think I can recommend this to anybody. But that begs the question of why? What made this experience so awful that I count it worse than Secret of Mana? Does it even have redeeming qualities, or is this game just straight up trash to be thrown to the wayside? Well, how about I quit my yapping and get into the video to talk about it? I'm Crimson Rosso, and welcome to my review of Dawn of Mana. Alright, so I have so many problems with this game that it's not even funny. For all of the bitching that I'm going to be doing later, I do admit that there are actually some good things about Dawn of Mana. God, that hurt to say. As much as I'm itching to tear apart this game for its many issues, I have always preached that I will be as fair as possible to any game I play, even if I hated the experience overall. So let's give this game the fair shot it deserves and talk about what it does right. First and foremost, I gotta give respect to how good this game actually looks. Now, for all of the issues it has, it is definitely a very pretty game to look at. It has a lot of variety in the areas you explore. Big lush forests, giant canyons, imposing towers. The devs who worked on this game really knew how to make a fantasy world look like a fantasy world. I wouldn't say it's the most visually impressive or technically amazing game on the PS2. So far, I'd actually probably give that to something like Final Fantasy XII. But even if it isn't, it's very clear the devs who worked on the Mana series knew what kind of world they wanted to make and knocked it out of the park making it. I'd say my favorite area of the entire game would probably be the giant airship you raid to save your girlfriend. Not only does the whole area just look really cool, I also just love the idea of beating your way through an enemy fortress, destroying everything to get back the person you care for. It's badass, and I'm glad that Mana does it multiple times throughout all their games. Probably also helps that at this point in time they were pretty far into the PS2 lifecycle, so they knew how to use the system to the best of its abilities to create the best visual experience they could. That's enough praising the visuals, though. What else do I have to say that's nice about this? Well, to give the game credit where it's due, the storyline is actually pretty risk-taking. By Mana standards at least. While stories were usually able to incorporate darker moments and themes into the narrative, something Final Fantasy has done since the 90s, that wasn't really something the Mana series was well known for. It had a couple serious moments, but it never really was the super dark series. In Dawn, however, they actually had the balls to take some pretty risk-taking story movements. Like, at the halfway point of this game, your girlfriend dies and the world pretty much just fucking ends. And the second half of the game is fighting through a destroyed world that you failed to protect. That's a pretty fucking ballsy move to make for a series that usually takes it pretty easy on the darker stuff. So I want to tip my metaphorical hat to them. Not bad, Mana devs. Not bad. Alright, was there anything else here? Oh yeah, the soundtrack absolutely slaps. Primarily composed by the OG himself, Kenji Ito, alongside getting help from Tayoshi Sekito and Soken! Sorry about that, just kinda got flashbanged by who was helping him out here. The three of them come together to make an absolutely damn good set of songs. As miserable and frustrated as I'm about to be when I get into the cons section with my endless complaining, I 100% stand by the fact that this game had some good tunes. That's really all the positives I had to say about it. Now let's get into what you guys are really here for and what I'm definitely looking forward to talking about. Alright, so now that all of the praises have been sung, let's just go ahead and tear this thing apart. Ripping the band-aid off nice and quick here, Dawn of Mana is not only one of the worst games I've had to complain about, and not just this year alone, but it's one of the worst games I've played in a good long while. While its visuals may be pretty, and its soundtracks may be poppin', the game immensely fails in the most crucial aspect, in that it just plain old fucking sucks to play. This might be one of the most frustrating things I've had to complete in my entire run on this channel for multiple reasons. First, let's talk about the level design. Yeah, these levels are very pretty, They're nice to look at, and there's no doubt that the team knew what they were doing with the visuals, but good God, they are not fun to go through. For starters, they are just way too big. I respect the fact that this was their first ever 3D game, so they probably wanted to go as big as they could with the visuals. My God, do they just end up making these levels way too big and way too spacey with very little in between anything other than just fighting enemies for them. As a result, so many maps just feel really, really empty and are just downright unbelievably boring. And it's not like they don't try to include stuff to do in these maps, as they do so many unique concepts like hunting for keys to go through doors, and then hunting for more keys to go through doors, and then platforming sections, and then more key hunting. Okay, look, adding in new stuff to try to fill up the emptiness of your areas is a smart idea. Unfortunately, Dawn of Mana's additions to gameplay just aren't very fun. For one thing, keys are usually hidden inside enemies. Okay, makes sense. Why wouldn't the keys be on enemies? You have to kill those to progress. But those enemies, unfortunately, are not marked for a while, so when you need to find them, get ready to spend a lot of time running around in these gigantic levels looking for the enemy you need to fight. Then once you finally kill the enemy and get the key, get ready to run all the way back to the door to unlock it. I cannot tell you how long I would spend in specific areas just looking for that one enemy because they didn't mark it on the map. And then sometimes a mark just does appear for some reason. Sometimes it just doesn't, and you're there for like 20 minutes. I don't know. I don't know if this was a bug in what I was playing, but for some reason, it was always so finicky on this, and it almost never showed up. I genuinely nearly quit the game by the third chapter because I was getting so tired of this fucking song and dance. But that's just key hunting. What exactly was so bad about things like the platforming? Well, aside from the fact that you're basically fighting with the controls that make Kingdom Hearts 1 look like it was made in the 2020s in terms of control, you are also having to grapple with the game's biggest obstacle of all, its most dastardly enemy it can throw at you, its own camera. Man, I'm gonna say this right here and now, I am so sorry, Kingdom Hearts 1, that I gave you shit for your camera, because this garbage is so much worse. I have never seen a camera in a game so actively against the player experience like Dawn of Mana's was. I genuinely can't tell you how many times I've had to repeat platforming sections. The camera would just get straight up stuck on the wall or not follow me well enough to the point where it had to land. And as a result, I'd fall into the ground and get jumped by an enemy and die. You would think after the fiasco that was the first Kingdom Hearts game, and how nobody really likes that game's camera, they would think to themselves, maybe we should never do that. Oh wait, no, with Dawn of Mana we can try this again. Maybe we can get it right this time. And they didn't. In fact, now that I keep bringing it up, this game does really feel like it's trying to emulate the feel of Kingdom Hearts 1. It has the same kind of camera, the same focus on the slower action combat, and it tries to mix in platforming sections as well. Hell, even a good portion of the enemies honestly kind of look like Heartless. Unfortunately though, this game cannot even capture a fraction of what made that first title so good. And it all comes together in this game's worst aspect, the combat. This might be the worst combat I've experienced from the series and on the PS2 so far. I may have disliked Secrets of Mana gameplay. Okay, that's an understatement for how much I fucking hated that gameplay style. But I also had no problem admitting that that gameplay system was at the very least a unique idea and concept. Dawn's combat, however, is just plain bad. So the main draw of this game is that in basically every level you start at level 1. And in order to work your way up, you have to kill enemies in order to get certain emblems to increase your power. However, the catch here is that enemies don't just normally drop emblems. You have to put them into a stun state by hitting them with objects you find around the map. Already when I say that out loud, that sounds like a weirdly convoluted concept for gameplay, right? Basically, instead of just facing the enemies head on, you have to spend time looking for something to hit them with. And then you can wail on them. Let me tell you, it may sound bad out loud, but it is so much worse when you put it into actual practice. Mainly due to the fact that due to the physics of this game, sometimes it just doesn't work. You can spend a good chunk of your time looking for something to shoot at the enemy, and it just misses because it bounces somewhere else. You do get a whip to grab things and throw them at other enemies. Hell, sometimes you can just grab enemies and throw them at other enemies. But, oh my god, this barely works either because sometimes enemies will just straight up be overshot from their target for no real reason. This takes a game that at most would maybe take you 10 to 15 hours to get through, and due to this mechanic, feels like it adds on an extra 10 hours due to just how frustrating gameplay gets, if you ever want any level ups. I can't tell you how often I was raging at this stupid ass mechanic, because it would just not work half the time. Like, I would be trying to play the game by its own rules, and then out of complete nowhere, it just overshoots stuff I throw and completely misses enemies, and then the enemies walk over and punch me in the fucking face and I take damage as a result. I would take it up the ass from a feral polar bear than ever put up with this mechanic again. It's just so unbelievably bullshit, and I am so glad this never caught on. I genuinely don't think it deserved it in the slightest. It's at its absolute worst with boss fights though, as not only do these guys have 4 times the amount of health your normal enemies do, but you also barely get any stun counter whenever you hit them with one. There is some slight levity with the little spirits you can find around the map that will give you special slingshot attacks, but they're very limited in terms of ammo, and even then they sometimes just don't work on bosses. The absolute worst moments in the entire game for me were the boss fights in Chapter 6 against the Masked Guru and the final fight. Now, with the Guru, you basically had to throw items at him that sometimes had homing and sometimes just didn't throughout the fight, as he sort of teleported around the arena, all the while combating the game's terrible camera system, and the single worst part being that you fought him in a tower. And he can knock you off this tower all the way down to the bottom, and if that ever happens, you gotta climb all the way back up. And you're gonna get knocked off a lot, because of how janky all this plays, and how frustrating that fucking camera is. Get ready to climb. I hope you like climbing. Oh boy, this is fun, right guys? Oh my god, my balls are so hard. God, this game is fun. I nearly snapped my controller in half dealing with this guy. And the final battle is even worse. You don't have to deal with the stupid tower bullshit like you do with Chapter 6, but if you ever lose this fight, which is gonna happen, let's not lie here, you have to redo the entire beginning section, which is chasing around Medusa for what feels like 5 minutes. It's moments like these that cause me to drink. I legit cannot tell you what they were thinking with this gameplay. I'm assuming they wanted to bang on the fact that it was unique and gimmicky, but it just leads to an overall insanely frustrating experience. It's one of the few games I've ever played on the channel where I genuinely don't think anyone should play it, even as like a little haha joke. It was that bad of an experience. I think I had more fun with fucking Eternites than I did this, and that is really saying something. Hell, honestly, I can't even say this is like a Secrets of Mana scenario either, because at least with that game, there were things like the massive visual improvements that could be genuinely appreciated. And again, I do think this game does look good. However, it's kind of beat by the fact that there are definitely better looking ones on the system it's on, so it doesn't even have that to help hold it up. And yeah, the story does take its risks, but it doesn't really make you care about anyone either. Like, there's a moment where the main character Keldric has to kill his best friend, and it's supposed to be this really sad and heartbreaking moment. But, like, I don't know who the fuck this is because we barely hang out with him. I don't know why developers think that gamers are going to care about relationships that just are never shown off screen or given any sort of development whatsoever, because you're just making me look at this blank slate and go, oh, well, that sucks. Wait, why are you crying? Get up, you pansy. We have to save a world. You know what? Instead of just complaining about this, let me tell you about a Mana game that actually gets something like this right, and that's Visions of Mana. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about some Visions of Mana spoilers here, so if you don't want to see that, skip to this time frame right here, and I'll get back to the review. Alright, giving you some time to go there, and we get into the spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So in Visions of Mana, the protagonist's girlfriend Hina ends up dying around chapter 4, and it's a pretty emotional scene because we spent multiple chapters seeing the bond between her and the main character. You see the multiple times they spend together, how happy they make each other, and how close they are, alongside endearing you to the character himself. So it's genuinely sad when she ends up passing away. In Dawn, however, this game rarely ever makes you care about any of the characters outside of like maybe 1 or 2 moments. So when it tries to push its more emotional part of it, it kind of feels half-baked as they're really only hit up by the pretty solid vocal performances of the main character. Sam Riegel, you're the only reason I even somewhat felt something here. Alright. Anyways, sorry for the tangent. That's just kind of been on my mind for a while, and I wanted to get it off my chest. And now that it's off my chest, that's really all I have to say in terms of cons. So let's go ahead and get into my final thoughts now. It's actually kind of impressive to me that we're not even close to being done with this franchise as of the making of this video, and I already have 2 games in it that have driven me up such a wall, it almost makes me wish I had never done this in the first place. I didn't even think that would happen, but lo and behold, Dawn proved me wrong on that. Good job to you once again. But unlike Secrets of Mana, there really is no reason for you to play Dawn whatsoever. For every single pro I could give this game, there's literally 3 times as many cons. That's why I have absolutely zero issue giving this game an immensely low 2.5 out of 10. Do yourself a favor and instead of playing it out of morbid curiosity, just go and play one of the many better action RPGs on the system. Trust me, there's dozens on the PS2. You don't need to play this. And that's it for this video. I may have hated it, but that's another Mana video down. Hopefully the next one is not as rage-inducing as this was. And if you liked what you saw here and want to stick around for the rest of the Mana Marathon, or see any of the other RPG stuff I make, do me a favor and like and subscribe down below. Leave a comment down there if you want to help me out in the algorithm, or if you're just up for a chat. And if you want to support me, or just hang out with me and the rest of my awesome community, go follow my Twitch, or go support the Patreon for ad-free videos and other goodies. That's all, folks. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.